Because I feel like I've cracked the code.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've now done enough case studies in completely different industries, and they all have the same framework. It's exactly what Tony Robbins says. Success leaves clues.
Well, I understand we're doing this in Ikea, and if you've cracked the code of Ikea, then I imagine you can put together Ikea furniture.
I really can't.
Because I've never seen you be able to follow
That wasn't in the
instructions.
book.
I've never seen you be able to follow good instructions, let alone Ikea instructions.
What a brand, what a brand, what a brand, what a mighty good brand. Say it again now. What a brand, what a brand, what a brand, what a mighty good brand.
But the IKEA case study is really fascinating. And it makes perfect sense why the brand became a cult phenomenon. And I really want to break it down today and do it in a linear way. So bear with me because there's just so much good information. I read the book, The IKEA Edge. And it was a later CEO that came back and kind of reflected on the business's success and what made IKEA the cult brand that it is today. And it really was a cool story. So what most people don't know about IKEA is that it's not a cheap retailer, right? It was everything about the brand was expertly crafted over many years in business. They started in 1943, and they basically didn't even expand past Europe until 1976. And they were so focused and obsessed on perfecting their product, providing value, being cost effective and cost efficient, and providing a greater good opposed to greed. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool actually is the founder, Ingvar Kamprad, he said, our mission is to grow. But when he said their mission is to grow, it wasn't to make more money. It was to become a better brand and to learn from its mistakes, but to ensure it had this strong, the same value points that you see all of the great brands being built on, like Home Depot, like Four Seasons, like Dyson. What are you giving those face for?
No, but he said that before those brands existed.
No, I know it's seeing the overlapping principles.
I think it's an interesting approach. Is like a human has to keep growing to be successful. If a business has a starting point of we're going to do what we think is right, but we're committed to growing, not just in size, but in terms of becoming better and more functional and learning from lessons learned. That's, I don't think a lot of businesses kind of start with that principle, and it's interesting.
Well, there's so many overlaps from luxury hoteliering in Four Seasons to DIYing in the Home Depot with IKEA. Like their obsession over like company culture and shared vision and having your employees be overqualified with the autonomy to improve the business structure. Like they even talk about like in the book talking about salary and compensation. They made sure that the payment was fair, but it was never about payment to work at IKEA, which is the exact same thing that Isidore Sharp talks about in the Four Seasons and what Home Depot talks about. It was you could get paid better somewhere else, but we had a really great culture and we really took care of our team. And there was something larger that you were becoming a part of that you could believe in and buy into by becoming a part of the IKEA team. They even said that they had all of the CEOs, there's been 3 CEOs in the company's history. The founder was the CEO for 65 years. And then
65 years?
He was 65 years. He was the CEO of the company. And and then after that, there was 2 other CEOs, but they both were internal hires. Every single manager is an internal hire because you have to be able to understand every aspect of the business. You have to have worked the floor. You have to know the supply chain, the operations. They don't allow you to manage until you absolutely know every part of the business.
What I think is one of the most interesting things about IKEA, it kind of comes from the law of unintended consequences, because my understanding from discussing the book with you is one of the differentiators for IKEA is that furniture transportation was so expensive. And one way to make furniture more affordable was to be able to design the furniture so that it can be packed flat and then assembled. And that ability to be packed flat just means you can put 10 times more furniture in a truck than pre-assembled furniture. So it saves people a lot of money, but you got the same quality of furniture. And the kind of humorous meme about IKEA, though, is that their instructions are difficult to follow. And the unintended consequence that people have spoken about is people actually value their IKEA furniture a bit more because it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
They realize
Like they have to build it.
Yeah, and they realize they're getting a better piece of furniture than from another place for the money because they have to build it. But the process of building it and figuring it out puts their personal DNA into the furniture.
No, you're so right. And what's also really cool about IKEA is they were so invested in experience before experience became such a buzzword for brands. So IKEA intentionally picked locations outside of city centers. For one reason, it was because it was easier to attract people that didn't live in a city in order to drive to the store because the city had so much competition for furniture. And two, by being outside of the city center, they could actually have a massive store with free parking. So free parking in a huge store was actually their mandate since the beginning in the 40s. And what's really cool is the whole idea of IKEA as it started to expand is they wanted it to be a one-stop shop. They wanted it to feel like an absolute solution, so that they've designed these like rooms within their warehouse or their storehouse so that it was very simple to see how everything worked together.
Can I ask you if you got the answer from the book? Because my experience from IKEA is as a consumer, and I remember buying my first house. I never really thought of IKEA. But as a young family, going to an IKEA is an experience for the first time.
Yeah.
Because it's not like going to Sears or going to a big furniture store where there's high pressure salespeople. You kind of walk in and it's almost deliberately, you're not sure where you're going, but it leads you on the journey through a home.
Yes.
But you're never bothered by salespeople.
No.
You're like saying you're free to kind of imagine what you need.
You're free to enjoy.
Yeah.
Even you're exactly right. They've got 5 core components for distinction. And their 5 core components for distinction were value for money. So they wanted to make sure that they combined design, function, and quality at an affordable price. 2 was exclusive products. So the Scandinavian designs were exclusive to IKEA. So they wanted that the IKEA furniture
They didn't license it anywhere else.
Nope, it was super unique. The 3rd was inspiration and ideas. So that you didn't feel pressured to buy something. You could go there to be inspired by the way that you want your house to look and feel. And by doing that, they wanted to make sure that there was an ease of shopping. So everything was provided under one roof, which is where the restaurant came in and the ball pit came in. So that if you were going to be inspired, or maybe you're buying a new house, or if you're going to plan out your kitchen with their kitchen planners, you had everything you needed under one roof. The plates, the forks, the knives, it was a one-stop shop for furniture. But then the 5th one was an absolute enjoyable experience. So the restaurant makes over $1.5 billion a year, but it's never been seen or designed to be a profit center. They intentionally keep the prices as low as possible because when your stomach is full, you are more likely to spend more money and to spend more time somewhere. Plus, it makes it an entire event. It's a whole.
It's the same reason Costco
fun.
sells a jumbo hot dog for $1.
Costco got it from IKEA.
That $1 jumbo hot dog makes Costco so much money.
And it's so but it's like they are like, to us, the restaurant is a part of our marketing mix. Like they don't even see it as like a line cereal, even though it generates over 1.5 billion a year, which is like fascinating. And the other thing too is he said he's writing this book like in the 90s. He's like, we never foresee IKEA being in city centers, which it now has entered into the city centers, but it's because their concept of being on the fringes of the city and making it like an event that you're going to and it making it so much fun is why IKEA has a cult following. Plus, they're able to fit way more into the store because everything is flat packed. And it was such a novel concept in the 60s to have they were the first ones to do flat pack furniture because back then furniture is something that you kept for a lifetime. Like once you got married, you were like gifted furniture and you kept it for life. This idea of having this like modern new age Scandinavian style furniture is interesting. And another thing that was really cool that he said is the global expansion was actually almost an accident because Sweden is such a small country. It was easy to oversaturate. So the need to move into other markets was purely because Sweden was such a small market. And he talks about how Walmart and Microsoft and Google were able to basically beat IKEA's growth trajectory with similar values and a focus on brand consistency. He said 2 things are really interesting for that. He goes, one, the rate at which you could global expand in the 90s and 2000s versus the 40s was drastically different. He goes, another thing though, he goes, is when you were based in America, your starting market size for Walmart was so much bigger and had so much a larger opportunity for growth than being from Sweden, right? Because it's so much easier to saturate that country. So for them to move over to North America and to expand global expansion was done by accident because they started in Poland. Then were able to move over to Asia as that was starting to happen in the 70s. And then when they moved over to North America, they picked Vancouver because of the direct shot through APAC, which was like an interesting first market because it was easier to move into Canada than it was to go into the States. Another thing that was really interesting is he notes how complicated it was to enter into China. So he said what was really odd about China from being like a store perspective as well as from distribution, because their big thing was they really wanted to stop child labor. And it was very difficult for them to do that because in Eastern culture and the high context culture, they'll say yes when they don't mean yes. And especially in the store structure, they have a whole IKEA culture concept is that managers and employees can work together and can have dialogue to improve a system and improve a store. But because hierarchy and power is so different in the East, it was very difficult for them to have that that Western culture that they had created in Europe and elsewhere, like in North America. So that final leg of their expansion in China was quite complicated for them to navigate their brand standards because of how different the culture is in the East.
I think the IKEA story somewhat relates almost to the Guinness case study we were doing, in that Guinness had a long time to perfect its product, its brand, and its delivery.
Yes, exactly.
And so IKEA being in Scandinavia, dealing with issues, but still being a pioneer, they had some time to build an experience that then when they moved out, they could replicate the experience. And that's what's so tight about IKEA. You go into an IKEA and just executed well.
Yes.
Right? And so they've four-seasoned it in many ways in terms of SOPs.
Well, and that was what goes interesting to that mission of like the duty to grow, like viewing growing as a responsibility to fulfill the social mission, not just to increase wealth, was a really interesting angle that they took, that they limited basically originally when there was the flat pack, there was a lot of formaldehyde that was on the furniture. And they really felt that they had a duty as a business, the larger they got, to be better for their customer, to be better for the environment. And they were able to, and the CEO credits them staying private to really having the control over the goodness that their brand could do, because he said public companies don't have that power, and IKEA was able to become such a great brand. He goes, we had the flexibility to go slow, and they wanted to go slow. They never wanted to merge. They never wanted to be acquired. Like, they weren't in it for money. They were in it, they wanted to keep costs low. They were very frugal with their dollars. They were very specific on how they did their accounting, and they were very transparent to the way in which they can be as a private company for what mattered to them and how they were approaching it, which is a really fascinating way of looking at it. Because he basically says, we've been around for 80 years because we focused on the things that mattered, and we weren't focused on rushing. Like, we didn't need to rush out of the market. We didn't need to rush to North America. Like, we decided to expand when it made sense.
No, and you didn't have to chase profits that put you at risk because, shareholders wanted better returns. Like, it almost parallels that story with books, that you can get a bestseller that disappears from the world in 2 years.
Yeah.
But if a book stays on the bestseller list, every additional year it stays on the bestseller list, the greater the chance it becomes a classic.
Yeah.
Right? And so if a book stays on the bestseller list for 10 years, it's probably going to be remembered 100 years from now.
No, exactly.
Right? And
it's so
IKEA,
simple.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, people who are wanting to have a great brand, it's not complicated. It's not focusing on the next quarter. It's not focusing on how can we make the most amount of money. It's offering a great product and having a very clear mission and value and vision. It's when he talks about, he's like, from 1943 to 1972, they reached 58.2 million, right? And then from 72 or 73 to 98, they reached 9.5 billion. But from 99 to 2010, they reached 31 billion. And it was that last phase, which is really the whole concept of compounding, right?
So wise.
What is his name though? Munger, and I always remember
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett.
Yeah, like most of his wealth came in his last two doublings in the
Yeah.
last 15 years.
And it's because they really knew their brand, right? And they were able to, when they entered into new markets, they had their systems, they had their SOPs, they were able to, they had gone through their growing pains. And it's funny to me because that's exactly what Brian Smith, the founder of UGG, said. He goes, there's like your phases of life, you know, infancy, toddler, child, teen, adolescent, like adult. Those phases of life are phases of business. And you can't go from being a baby to being a grown up. And businesses want to rush, the time of life. And that's what was really interesting, to even see the CEO break down IKEA's lifetime by the evolution through the years in 3 core phases is such a perfect reminder of, like, greatness takes time. And you can't get there overnight.
I guess the business life cycle is meant to be enjoyed. It's not like you just start and you want to be like a seasoned professional in their 50. You know what I mean? Like enjoy the journey of building a business, and if it's a short-term business, that's fine. But if you want to build something that's remembered, then enjoy the journey and build that brand.
No, and another thing I love too is him talking about the company's capacity for positive impact. And he goes, like, our core focus for our business were the following 4 things. And it's an economic empowerment. They wanted to provide good jobs for people. They wanted to pay people fair wages, but they wanted to, like, the emphasis was on good. Like, they wanted their employees to love where they worked.
Because you said Costco. I bet you Costco took more inspiration from IKEA than
100%.
I don't know if they have an autobiography, but Costco is a journey to walk through. It's kind of fun to experience. They pay their people better. Like, Walmart tried to sue Costco for paying its people too much, right? Costco picks great products, but doesn't dilute with tons of products on the same stuff.
Exactly.
Like, I bet you the founder of Costco loved IKEA.
100%. Yeah. But there's so much of these great brands that people, like, really love, where there's, like, overlapping principles. And then the second one was environmental responsibility. So they were really focused on providing sustainable practices and having a focus to having better environmentalism. 3 is improving living standards. They wanted to make sure that people in lower income classes had access to better furniture that was going to last longer, that they could buy at a price that they can afford because they're being involved in the building of it, and it's a cheaper cost cutting. And then the 4th is employee fulfillment, which was all about providing meaningful work and opportunities for personal growth. Like, of their 4 capacity, like, the 4 companies' core mandates are not about making money, but they made a shit ton of money. Like, money comes when you have the right focus, the right vision, the right values, and that's the 4 seasons, the right people. Like,
it's the 4 seasons. It's the
Home Depot.
That focus brings better people in, which then gives an intangible benefit to your competitor who is Mickey Mousing every employee.
Well, and that was what they said. They're like, the gap, like, even in the 90s when they went through, so in the 90s when there was the big economic crash, they were kind of creating their 10-year plan so that they could go from basically the $31 billion scale that they did 91 to 2010. And during that time, they realized that the gap between them and the competitors became so great because people of all economic classes loved IKEA. And it wasn't something that really got impacted by the economy because it was a great product at a great price. Like, no matter where you were in the economy, people like value. And by focusing on providing a great value and a great product and providing a great experience, they didn't, like, the difference in delta between them and a retailer that's on the low end and the high end, like they were almost untouched. And it's a really interesting case study of you're recession proof when you're great, like when you're obsessed with greatness and you're focused on great price point. It's what Bezos talks about. Like this never goes out of style, like offering a great price, a great service, and a great experience.
Their design was good, and they had that practical Scandinavia. So, like, I remember having a young family, I feel like IKEA grabbed the zeitgeist of getting your first home. Like, it's the best place to get cutlery and napkins, you know what I mean? Where it just felt warm to go in and think about filling your first home, right? But then they had the collective expertise that their products were designed well. So if you got one, they have this special chair with a footrest. And I just remember people ever saying, that's one of the most comfortable chairs ever. And it wasn't that expensive, but anybody could afford a really comfortable chair. You know, it didn't have to be in one of those high-end Ames chairs that we're talking about. Like, they really nailed giving people a sense of luxury at affordability because they nailed design.
And their design was so unique. You know, they weren't copying other people. Like, it was always... Like, even I remember the kids section. I loved going to IKEA with my mom when I was a kid.
The kids section, you could picture healthy Scandinavian kids always in their kids' rooms.
But it was always kind of weird. Like, they didn't, like, try to make it Americanized.
Yeah.
Like, it was always this kind of, like, Europe. But I loved it. I loved going with my mom to IKEA. And I loved walking through the store. And we loved the as-is section. You know, like how they had that whole section of like when people return stuff, and it was so fun to find a treasure for like less money.
You know what their kids section reminded me of? It never reminded me of spoiled kids.
No,
it reminded me
it was
of
so
inquisitive
functional.
Kids. You know what I mean? It had that functional kind of treating them a little bit like an adult, but it was always a very positive
feeling.
part of it, yeah.
I even remember going to the daycare at IKEA and like how much I loved how that brand treated me as a child. You know, when you talk about how much McDonald's invests in like the child psychology for requesting, you know, McDonald's product by the arches. The experience I had when I was a kid, my mom dropped me off at IKEA. Like, I was so excited to go to that daycare. The ball pin, they always had movies playing. Like, it was a really fun experience. And they had offered this really great program at Christmas where you came and bought a Christmas tree and you would get $100 to spend at IKEA after January 1st. And so basically you got your Christmas tree free if you came back and you bought something. And the Christmas tree was only like $20. And it was like a really good price for the Christmas tree. And it gave us a reason to go back. And we would drive literally halfway across the city to get a Christmas tree every year. And we would go in to get the dollar like spiral cones. We'd get 2 bags of meatballs. We'd walk the whole store. We'd pick the tree. We'd put it on the top of the car and we'd drive back. Like, it became an event. And to this day, my mom still buys her Christmas tree at IKEA because of this incentive. And my mom doesn't go shopping anywhere. But IKEA became a staple within our family because of how much they thought about us thoughtfully as a customer.
Hopefully most of our listeners have been to an IKEA, but I think the next time you go through an IKEA, pay attention to the details that you take for granted that are really the products of decades of focusing on experience.
100%.